Welcome to the Stoic Thunder Podcast, taking an ancient philosophy for a 21st century test drive, learning on the way. One of my earliest memories was of seeing a giant statue of Buddha on holiday in Thailand. Travelling from where we lived in Hong Kong, I was used to seeing rather bold and distinctive art and figurines, varying in quality. But there was something, even given its size, quite friendly about this figure. I liked it, having no idea who it was or why it was there. About 15 years ago, I looked into Buddhism, as a curiosity rather than a religion to follow, although being an atheist, the distinct lack of a deity meant it could be seen as an option. I came across the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, the former being somewhat dismaying at the time and the latter being an excellent guide for personal conduct in particular. I remember not being able to get past the idea of letting go of things I held dear, or rather those people I held dear. Perhaps an error in understanding at the time, but whilst I can appreciate the necessity of doing so on a spiritual level, it didn't feel like it was something I could willingly accomplish. Fast forward to 2020, and I've stumbled across Stoicism. And whether it's something in the language or my openness to uncomfortable notions, which philosophy is pretty good at throwing at you, its principles are strikingly similar, but perhaps are not as starkly followed in a material sense, certainly in the West. There are a number of Stoic quotes that are relevant to the nature of materialism, but in this regard I wanted to speak about family and love in particular. One of the first aspects you start to see in any book on Stoicism is the nature of externals, things you can't control, and viewing those things that can bring forth great pleasure and satisfaction are to be dealt with in moderation. The Stoics seem to have appreciated romantic love in particular with beautiful reason. They often speak about remaining detached to these externals as best you can, or at the very least regarding them as preferred indifference. I love that term. But how can you do that with love? Bound. Isn't that what poems and sonnets or Hallmark cards teach us? One, intertwined, together. On my wedding day, my cousin gave us a beautifully framed copy of a poem by Khalil Gibran. The last part in particular struck me the most. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. Now, I'm not sure if he ever thought of himself as a Stoic, but it seems not unlike something Epictetus would say. Love, especially in its early stages, can be very consuming, emotionally, certainly physically, and with one of our most precious commodities, time. For a lot of people, this propulsion, this surge of biological reactions, is the pinnacle of what our metaphorical hearts are capable of. Power and intensity denote substance and therefore worth, right? But I see love as being analogous to agriculture of all things. Growth, sometimes slow, often pressured by outside influences, other times as swift and unexpected, but ideally measured and assessed throughout. Sounds romantic, huh? I'm lucky. Even on difficult days, I'm often surprised just how much I love my husband. I'll be looking at him and I'll suddenly wonder if it's the first time I'm looking at him from this angle. For a moment he appears as a stranger to me, but it's kind of like that feeling you get when you think of a word you've used a million times and it seems for a moment to be brand new. It doesn't even sound right when you say it. Then the moment passes and you float back into warm familiarity. To think of my husband in particular as someone who is such an integral part of my life, yet is not of me, is weirdly paradoxical, although it really shouldn't be. We have a lot of differences, which is an aspect of our relationship that I adore, but in the past I've relied on our combined strength, perhaps more than I should have, often out of absolute necessity, but I viewed our connection as an entity that can be drawn upon to help bolster myself and define myself, more than I should have let it. So being detached from an attachment takes nothing away from its beauty, its integrity, and its truth. But it does have the power to remind me that it's not something owed to me. It's not sustenance, it's an earned privilege. Or as Seneca said, if you wish to be loved, love.